October 19th, 1864, 6 in the morning, Cedar Creek, Virginia. The fog comes off the Shenandoah River in sheets. It rolls across the low ground between the creek and the Union camps in dense white waves, swallowing everything below the knee, turning the world into a landscape of disembodied torsos and rifle barrels floating in a sea of white. The temperature has dropped overnight. The ground has a thin crust of frost. The leaves are turning on the Blue Ridge to the east, orange and copper and deep red, visible in the breaks between the fog. It is the kind of morning that makes Virginia look like a painting of itself. The Union soldiers are still sleeping. This is not carelessness. This is not incompetence. The men of the Army of the Shenandoah have spent 6 weeks in this valley fighting and winning. They took a great Confederate army under General Jubal Early and hid it at Winchester and destroyed it. They took it again at Fisher's Hill and broke it a second time. They drove it 60 miles up the valley. They stripped the Shenandoah Valley of everything that could feed an army, burning barns and haystacks and grist mills from one end of the valley to the other, turning the breadbasket of the Confederacy into a charred corridor of smoke and ruin. Their commanding general, Philip Sheridan, had told Grant and Lincoln that a crow flying over the Shenandoah Valley now would have to carry its own rations. They have earned this morning's rest. The army is encamped on the north side of Cedar Creek in a configuration that feels secure. 3 corps of infantry spread along the valley floor. The 6th Corps, the largest and most veteran, is positioned on the right, the safest ground, anchored against a bluff. The 8th Corps and the 19th Corps are on the left, in a line that bends back from the creek. The cavalry is out on the flanks. The Confederate army, everyone believes, is 20 miles up the valley, too broken and starved to be a serious threat before spring. Sheridan himself is 20 miles away in Winchester. He rode there 2 days ago to attend a meeting in Washington, called back to discuss the next phase of the campaign. He left his 3 corps commanders in charge with instructions to be alert, but with the genuine professional belief, supported by his intelligence, that Early's army was finished as an offensive force. He is wrong, and the man who is about to prove it to him spent the last 3 weeks preparing for this exact moment with the kind of meticulous planning that history would almost completely ignore. Because what happened next was so dramatic that the preparation became a footnote. General Jubal Early is not a handsome man. He is bent by arthritis, sharp-tongued, profane, and deeply unpopular with many of the officers who serve under him. He drinks. He picks fights with subordinates. He lost battles at Winchester and Fisher's Hill in ways that suggest something other than the best generalship. He is not Stonewall Jackson. He is not Robert E. Lee. He is the man Lee sent to the Shenandoah Valley because everybody else was pinned at Petersburg, and Early was available and competent and willing. But Early has something that competence alone doesn't explain. He has John Gordon. General John Brown Gordon is 32 years old, a Georgia lawyer who taught himself soldiering by instinct and battlefield experience, and a constitution that seemed genuinely incapable of fear. He is lean and dark and charismatic in the way that certain men are charismatic, the way that makes soldiers follow them without being able to articulate why. He does not have Jackson's strange religious intensity. He has something earthier and more direct. He simply believes at a cellular level that things can be done that other men believe cannot be done. He is usually right. Gordon has spent 3 days on the face of Massanutten Mountain with a compass, a sketchbook, and the specific kind of patience that only a man who believes the answer exists will bring to a problem. He is scouting the Union left flank, not from a distance. He is watching it from above, from a ledge 1,200 feet up the mountain, studying the exact position of every regiment he can identify through his glass, tracing the line of the creek below, noting where the ground is passable and where it is not, noting where the river narrows enough that infantry in single file can wade it in the dark. He comes down from the mountain and goes to Early with a plan that is staggering in its ambition and lunatic in its risk. He wants to cross the river at night with 3 Confederate divisions, in darkness, in silence, along a narrow path on the face of Massanutten Mountain that is in places no wider than 2 men walking abreast, with a drop of hundreds of feet on one side. He wants to be in position to strike the Union left flank at exactly the moment the fog is thickest, before first light, before the soldiers have risen from their blankets. He wants to hit them so fast and so completely that the surprise alone drives them off the field before they can organize a coherent defense. Early looks at the plan. He looks at the map. He looks at Gordon. He says yes. On the night of October 18th, Confederate infantry moves out in complete silence. The men are ordered to sling their tin cups inside their jackets so they will not clatter. Canteens are emptied and packed in haversacks to prevent sloshing. Officers speak in whispers. The column moves along the face of the mountain in single file in the dark, the river a black ribbon far below them, the stars reflected in it, the path so narrow that men move one foot directly in front of the other for hours without stopping, without speaking, without knowing what is on either side of the path because they cannot see it. 4 miles, 5 miles, the river crossing in the dark, thigh deep, the water cold enough to take the breath away, the men holding their rifles above their heads and biting down on whatever they have in their pockets to keep from making noise. The far bank, the fog thickening as they move down into the low ground toward the Union camps. Dawn comes at 5:20. The Confederate line strikes. The Union 8th Corps is hit first. They are barely awake. The sentries on the picket line fire once and run. The officers come out of their tents trying to understand what the sound is, and the Confederate infantry is already inside the camp, moving between the tents, and the fighting is so close and so confused that units cannot distinguish friend from enemy in the fog and the screaming. The 8th Corps dissolves, not slowly, not regiment by regiment, all at once, like a wave collapsing. The men don't walk away, they run north, away from the creek, away from the sound. The 19th Corps, next in line, hears the 8th Corps coming toward them in the fog. They hear the sound before they see it, the sound of an army disintegrating. It sounds different from the approach of an enemy. It sounds like water rushing through a break in a dam. Units try to form and are swept away by the flood of running men before they can fix bayonets. Within 40 minutes of the first shot, 2 Union Corps are effectively finished as fighting formations. Only the 6th Corps, the veterans anchored on the right, holds. They form a defensive line. They fight with the grim professional competence of men who have seen panics before and chosen not to join them. They buy time. But they are outnumbered, and the Confederate pressure keeps building, and the left flank is open, and there is nothing on it but men running north toward Winchester. By 7 in the morning, the Confederate Army has captured 18 Union artillery pieces. It has driven the Army of the Shenandoah off the Cedar Creek position. It has taken hundreds of prisoners. It has reversed, in under 2 hours, 6 weeks of Union dominance in the valley. The jubilation in the Confederate ranks is total. The men whoop and cheer and wave their hats. They have been beaten and humiliated and driven up this valley. And now they have come back in the dark and done something that should have been impossible, and the feeling of it is overwhelming. Some units stop to loot the Union camps. The Confederates are hungry. They have been hungry for months. The Union camps are full of food, hardtack and salt beef and coffee and canned goods and things that a Confederate soldier in October of 1864 has not tasted in weeks. They stop to eat. This is the moment. This is the hinge. Not a decision made by a general, a decision made by hunger. Early sees it happening and tries to stop it, but the momentum of the assault has been the energy of starving men who needed to win, and the winning has temporarily become indistinguishable from the eating, and the discipline required to pull men away from their first real meal in days and push them forward against a still organized 6th Corps is a kind of discipline that Early cannot conjure in this moment. The advance slows, the 6th Corps holds, the lines stabilize. The battle, which was a Confederate rout, becomes something more complicated and inconclusive. A terrible morning has become a strange, suspended afternoon. 20 miles north, on the Valley Pike in Winchester, a horse named Rienzi is standing in a stable. Philip Sheridan heard the cannon fire at 9:01 in the morning. He was in his room at the Logan residence in Winchester, where he had spent the night on his way back from Washington. The distant rumbling might have been anything. Artillery practice, a skirmish on the picket line. He ate breakfast. He went outside. He mounted Rienzi and began to ride south toward Cedar Creek, not at a gallop, not in a panic, because Sheridan was not a man who moved in panic, but at a pace that could cover distance while he gathered information from every rider he passed heading the other direction. The information that comes to him on the Valley Pike in the next 30 minutes is delivered by men who are running away from a battle. Couriers arrive pale and wild-eyed. Stragglers from the 8th and 19th Corps are walking and sometimes running north with the blank expression of men whose minds have decided to go somewhere else while their bodies figure out the direction of safety. Officers stop him and try to explain. The army has been surprised, the left has been broken, the 6th Corps is holding, but it is uncertain for how long. Sheridan listens to all of it without expression. He is 33 years old. He stands 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighs 115 pounds and has the dark, compact look of a man built for exactly this kind of situation, as though whatever there is in the human animal that hardens under pressure had simply been concentrated into a smaller package than usual. He served under Grant in the West, and Grant loved him for a specific reason that went beyond his tactical ability. Sheridan did not accept the premise that a situation was unrecoverable until he had personally assessed it. He turns Rienzi south. He kicks him to a gallop. What follows enters American history not as a military event, but as a cultural one, a poem by Thomas Buchanan. Reed, titled Sheridan's Ride, would be published within weeks and recited in parlors and printed in newspapers and read aloud in schools for the rest of the century. The poem is a product of its time, and the legend it describes is real in its emotional truth, even where it simplifies the military reality. But the poem captures something genuine, something that was actually there on the Valley Pike that morning. Sheridan gallops south. He passes the stragglers. He does not shout at them or curse them. He rides among them, and he shouts a single message, delivered at a full gallop, to every group of men he passes. Face the other way, boys. We're going back. He says it over and over. Face the other way. We're going back. Some of the men stare at him blankly, the way a man stares when his brain has already decided the answer is no. Some turn around. Some begin to walk south. And as he passes each group, some of them begin to follow, not because they are ordered to, not because they have been shamed, but because something in the sight of that small, dark man on the big black horse riding toward the sound instead of away from it says something that no order can say and no speech can say, and that the men of a broken army in the autumn of 1864 needed to hear with their eyes rather than their ears. He arrives at the 6th Corps position at approximately 10:30. What happens when he rides up to the 6th Corps line is described by multiple witnesses in almost identical terms, which is itself a remarkable thing, because eyewitness accounts of battlefield moments rarely agree on the details, and yet the men who were there in those minutes tell the same story with the same image at the center of it. The 6th Corps sees him coming from a distance. They recognize the horse first. Rienzi is a Morgan stallion, large and black and distinctive. They recognize Sheridan next. The shout goes up before he reaches the line. Sheridan. Sheridan is here. It moves through the regiments the way fire moves through dry grass. The sound of it builds on itself. Men who were bracing for another Confederate assault and calculating how long they could hold are suddenly making a different calculation entirely. He rides the length of the line with his hat raised above his head. The cheering that follows is described by one officer as the most savage sound he ever heard from human throats. It is not the polite cheer of a parade ground or the tired cheer of men going through a ritual. It is the sound of an army that had accepted defeat being told by the arrival of one man that the acceptance was premature. Sheridan spends the next 4 hours reorganizing. He is systematic, methodical, furious in the way that certain methodical men are furious, with an anger that is cool rather than hot, that goes into the work rather than into shouting. He finds the 8th and 19th Corps stragglers and reforms them. He sends cavalry to collect men walking north on the pike and turns them south. He establishes a new line. He rides it end to end, not once but several times, looking at the Confederate position across the fields, making the calculations a general makes when he is deciding not whether to attack, but when and how. The Confederates have stopped in the Union camps. The advance is stalled. Early is trying to push forward against the 6th Corps, but the momentum of the morning is gone, and his men are tired and satiated in a way that fighting men are not supposed to be in the middle of a battle they have not yet finished. At 4 in the afternoon, Sheridan attacks. It is not a cautious attack. It is not a demonstration or a probe. It is a full commitment of everything the army has. Cavalry sweeping wide on both flanks while the infantry hits the Confederate center. The plan is to fold the Confederate flanks inward simultaneously and prevent any organized retreat. It is the kind of plan that only makes sense if you believe your men will execute it completely and without hesitation, and that belief requires the men to also believe it. And 4 hours ago, these men were running north on the Valley Pike. They are not running now. The Confederate line holds for perhaps 40 minutes, and then it breaks. Not in the orderly way that an army retreats under pressure, giving ground deliberately, maintaining cohesion, falling back to the next defensible position. It breaks the way the Union Army had broken in the morning, suddenly and completely and all at once. Early loses control of his divisions the moment the flanks begin to fold, and the realization spreads through the Confederate ranks that the army they broke this morning is coming back at them with something extra in the charge, some accumulated energy of reversal and fury that is more than the mathematics of numbers and position can account for. The Union cavalry gets behind the Confederate line and captures the artillery that Early's men had taken from the Union camps that morning. They capture it back. Every gun. They capture 23 additional Confederate guns on top of that. The Confederate Army loses its cohesion entirely and streams up the valley in the dark. And this time there is no rally, no regrouping, no audacious night march along the face of a mountain. Early's army is finished. The Shenandoah Valley is finished. The Confederacy's ability to threaten Washington from the valley, the threat that had haunted Lincoln and the Union High Command for 3 years, is finished. The Battle of Cedar Creek lasts approximately 12 hours from the first Confederate volley to the end of the Union pursuit. In that 12 hours, the Union Army loses the battle, accepts defeat, comes back from the edge of disaster, and destroys the force that destroyed it. It is the most complete single-day reversal in the American Civil War, and it happens because of a man on a horse riding 20 miles and saying 7 words to every group of beaten soldiers he passes. Face the other way, boys. We're going back. What Cedar Creek reveals about the nature of command and the nature of armies in the middle of a desperate war is something that the military manuals of 1864 did not have language for, and the military manuals of today still struggle to codify, because it lives in a space that is not tactics, and is not strategy, and is not logistics. It lives in the space between a leader's belief and an army's belief, and the question of how belief transfers from one to the other in a moment of genuine crisis. Sheridan did not have better information than his corps commanders when he rode south on the Valley Pike. He did not have a plan. He did not arrive at the front with a prepared set of orders and a tactical solution already mapped out. He arrived with a conviction. The conviction was simple and it was total, and it was, on the evidence of the morning, not obviously well-founded. The conviction was that the situation was recoverable, that what looked like a catastrophe was actually an opportunity in disguise, that an army that had been surprised and routed at dawn had simply been given a problem to solve rather than a defeat to absorb. The men who were walking north on the pike were not cowards. They were soldiers who had run the calculation that running soldiers always run. They had assessed the situation with the information available to them, the information of the immediate moment, the fog and the noise and the collapsing line and the men screaming past them in the wrong direction, and they had concluded that the rational response was to leave. That calculation was not wrong given what they knew. Sheridan gave them different information, not tactical information, not intelligence about Confederate positions or troop strengths. He gave them the information of his own certainty. His willingness to ride toward the thing they were running from was a data point that overrode everything else they had concluded about the morning. This is what Lincoln understood when the dispatches arrived. This is why Cedar Creek mattered beyond its military value, which was itself immense, closing the last Confederate threat to the north and securing Grant's flank at Petersburg. It mattered because it happened in October of 1864, 3 weeks before a presidential election that Lincoln was losing. The war was supposed to be over. Lincoln had promised it would be over. Grant had been fighting in the wilderness and at Spotsylvania and at Cold Harbor since May, and the casualty lists had horrified the country, and Richmond was still standing, and the Peace Democrats were saying loudly and convincingly that the whole thing was a failure and a fraud and that George McClellan would end the killing. Lincoln needed a victory. He needed several. Sherman had taken Atlanta in September, which helped, but Atlanta was far away and strategic and hard to feel in the gut. What Cedar Creek offered was the image, the story, a broken army, a single man riding back into the disaster, the impossible reversal. It was a story that the newspapers could tell in a way that made people feel the war in their bones. It was the story of a country that did not quit. The dispatches from Cedar Creek arrived in Washington while Lincoln was still awake. He read them at the telegraph office, that room he had haunted for 3 years, wrapped in his gray shawl, waiting for the clicks that meant disaster. This time, the clicks meant something else. He walked to the window. He stood there in the Washington dark for a long moment. Then he went to write a message to Sheridan. He wrote, "With great pleasure I tender to you and your brave army the thanks of the nation and my own personal admiration and gratitude for the month's operations in the Shenandoah Valley, and especially for the splendid work done last Tuesday, October 19th, the day that should have ended in the destruction of an army and the fall of a general and possibly the fall of a president. Lincoln won the election 3 weeks later. He won it because the country had been shown in the specific and visceral way that a story shows things that an argument cannot, that the men leading the Union cause were not done, that they were the kind of men who, when told the army was destroyed and the battle was lost, and the only rational response was to accept the result, got on a horse and rode toward it anyway. Sheridan's ride lives in the culture as a poem and a legend and a romanticized version of a thing that was in reality muddy and cold and filled with the particular terror of men who believed they were going to die. The poem makes it grand, the reality is grander, because the reality includes the stragglers on the pike who turned around when they had no particular reason to accept the sight of that horse, and the 6 Corps veterans who cheered in a way that witnesses spent the rest of their lives trying to describe accurately, and the Confederate soldiers who had done everything right, had planned and prepared and executed with the precision of the desperate, and found that it was not enough because the man on the other side simply refused to let it be enough. Wars are decided by many things, by numbers and supply lines and geography and the grinding mathematics of industrial capacity, by the decisions of presidents and the failings of generals and the quality of railroad track and the depth of winter mud. All of these things are real, and none of them can be dismissed. But sometimes, at the pivot point of a specific day on a specific field, they are decided by 7 words spoken at a full gallop to a group of men who have already decided to stop. Face the other way, boys. We're going back.